Hello, welcome to part 3 of my AMCAS activities section. In this video, I will go through my top 3 most significant activities and then stick around for the end where I give you 4 of my tips for how to fill out your AMCAS activities section. If you haven't seen part 1 and 2 yet, they are down in the description. Let's get started. And moving on to my 3 most significant experiences. These experiences were probably the ones that were the longest, and I had built the strongest relationships with my advisors or whoever I was interacting with there. So let me make myself a little bit smaller here. So one of the first things is during my undergrad, right after my freshman year, I applied to an undergraduate research program through my university. And here I started conducting research to produce hydrogels, carbon nanotube hydrogels that we later wanted to use for an in vitro model for drug screening of the peripheral nervous system. And I ended up having an amazing professor, an amazing PI that I built a very strong relationship with throughout my 4 years of undergrad. So you can see that after the initial program, it was a summer program, I continued on. And so I had this professor who knew me super well throughout all 4 years, who I was able to work on publications with. And we ended up having 2 publications out of this research. And then being able to attend multiple research conferences and presenting posters and winning some poster awards. And honestly, creating posters was one of my favorite things. It just brought out my creative side, right? Research is research and it's scientific and logical, but creating your poster can be very creative and you can release that energy through that. And maybe I'll make another video on how to make a research poster. But basically, this was super impactful for me, not only conducting the research, but just having so many experiences at different conferences, and writing a research paper was definitely an experience. So definitely the key takeaways here is you see somebody is long-term commitment and they're putting themselves out there. They are going out to conferences, they are trying their best, and they are putting their best foot forward. Now, I can tell you that this research that I engaged in was not my favorite. I did not enjoy conducting research that much, but now that I reflect on it, I think that I didn't enjoy it purely because of the type of research it was. It was more bench lab work, and I think I would like to engage more in clinical research or something that is more tangible. I like things that are not microscopic, but rather, something physical that I can touch, that I can produce. So it's important to realize what kind of research you want to engage in and not kind of have one experience and then be like, oh, I hate doing research, because there's so many different types of research that you can partake in. So moving on from there, I also worked in a startup. So I think during my junior or senior year, I can't remember, I joined a startup accelerator and formed a team, a multidisciplinary team, and we worked on creating a device that would prevent catheter-associated urinary tract infections. And so this was super important for me because not only did I get to work as an engineer and building things and creating things and 3D printing and design, but also this is when I started really getting into entrepreneurship. So I was learning how to write up business plans, do elevator pitches, build websites, and just business plan proposals, going to multiple startup competitions. This was the first time I was able to go to China, the first time I was able to go to Paris for a competition. And it was just so many new things that I really, really enjoyed, because it wasn't like there was a right or wrong answer. This was something that we were all learning on the go, and we were getting to meet different physicians, different people from all over the place, and learn so many different things. And again, this was roughly 2 to 3 years of engagement. And so some of my key takeaways here is if I see this from an application, I can think, okay, this person is thinking outside the box. They're okay with learning on the go, even though, right, I wasn't taught as an entrepreneur. I wasn't taught anything about writing business plans. I learned on the spot as we were going. And of course, it still has medical relevance. We were interacting with key players like physicians, urologists, and getting their input as to what criteria was necessary to build this device, because they were the ones interacting with the patients directly, and they knew what their patients needed and wanted. So this was a key experience for me, 100%. And then my last most meaningful experience, so this is the new experience that I had in my second application cycle once I had done my gap year, was the Fulbright program. So I was an English teaching assistant at the Medical University of Warsaw in Poland. And this was a 9-month experience, but I put so many hours into it. It was a full-time job, basically. And even though I was supposed to be an English teaching assistant, it was not an assistant at all. I was basically thrown into the role of a full-on professor, having to write my own lectures, my own classes, my own lesson plans, creating activities, exams, so on and so forth. And one of the other things is that I actually ended up having a bunch of international students from 20 plus countries, like literally scattered all over the world. They had just arrived to Poland and were starting their medical education. And again, that was another learning experience of its own. And you can see that I spend my third paragraph basically explaining how this was a learning experience for me, right? So I was moving to a completely new country for the first time all by myself, having to find an apartment, not knowing the language. So that was extremely hard, and it shows adaptability. On top of that, I had to be a professor all of a sudden, which I had never been a professor before. I was a teaching assistant during undergrad, but never had to write my own exams or anything like that. And I was interacting with all of these different students from different cultures, languages, religious beliefs. So I was working towards my cultural awareness. And then finally, I was able to, of course, visit other European countries and engage in discussions on diversity and how diversity impacts the Fulbright program. So this was a huge experience that I spoke about during my actual interviews that I think really made me stick out, but not because of the Fulbright program itself, but because I was able to show how this experience impacted me significantly and changed kind of the course of my life and my thought process. So I'm going to leave you guys with 4 tips that I think are super crucial for the AMCAS activities section. First thing is, don't stress about the hours. If you put yourself in the perspective of an admissions committee and you think about reading someone's application, do you really stress how many hours someone put into it? Like, what's the difference between 100 hours versus 150? Do you really want to stress the accuracy of the hours? Like, for me, it's not as important. What's more important is that you show how an activity impacted you. So the next thing is, don't make this a resume. Don't make this just a list of things that you did. Because if you just list all of these things, everybody can create a list of things that they've done, but it does not show how this experience or this activity impacted you or it transformed you or changed your perspective or how it was a learning experience. So that brings me to tip number 3, show how it impacted you. Spend maybe a few, 1, 2, 3 sentences listing what you did, but then the second portion of your explanation should be, this is what I learned from this experience. And then you can use that to build a narrative, right? You can use that to build a narrative that will then build upon your personal statement. So for me, you can see that my activities recurringly show long-term commitment. They show initiative, creativity, thinking outside of the box, cultural competency and awareness, working with different populations. So I can take these themes and then build on them in my personal statement, or vice versa. So that builds your narrative. And then the 4th thing for me is finding a way to make yourself stand out, right? So all pre-med students shadow, all pre-med students volunteer, all pre-med students or most pre-med students probably do scribe or EMT or, you know, those typical pre-med activities. But you should have activities that make you stand out, something that is unique to you, something that it doesn't have to necessarily be medically relevant. So for me, it would be going abroad, right? You can see I went abroad once, twice. I engaged with different cultures. You can see that I also went abroad and did startup competitions because I was involved in entrepreneurship. So those things are things that are unique to me and not just these generic things that we need to check off as pre-meds. So there you go. Those are my 4 tips. If you guys are interested in more insights on how to fill out the MCAS activities section, give it a like, thumbs up, comment below if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.